the goal for direction is to see God, regardless of if you had to hit rock bottom first, if you had to go through this first, if you had to go through that, or if you just were always there. The key of direction is to follow God.
Do what I do. I do it for God. You know he the truth. I do it for God.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Grounded Podcast. I'm Marissa.
And I'm Michelle. And today we are going to be talking about divine direction.
Yeah.
So I thought this would be a good topic because it really came to me while I was on vacation for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I realized is we're always moving towards a specific direction, but we don't have we move without purposes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes without purposes. And I just thought this would be a good topic to go along with in talking about God's direction, using God to move towards a specific direction with a purpose.
Right, because a lot of people move, based on their desires, or they just go because they feel like going. So I think it is important to determine, divine direction.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know when God is leading you to do something?
Yeah, so the first thing that we wanted to start off with today is how to seek direction when you feel lost. Is really just kind of like the overall topic of this conversation. So non-biblically, when you're lost, what do? We
look at a map and the GPS. It's the same thing in my mind, biblically,
Ask the next person over, like, hey, do you know what direction I'm supposed to, that's what we do. That's what our
it's
flesh
like our
tells
instinct,
us, instincts tells us to do. But when you are spiritually lost, how do you seek direction? Where do you go to find that direction?
I feel like it's the same thing, though. I feel like, I know how we were saying, like, GPS, all of that. I feel like it's the same thing, like, when you're spiritually lost, but they're just different. Like, the word is literally like a GPS. Mm-hmm. Like, you go to the word, or you ask God, or sometimes I'll literally, like, to be honest, if I don't feel like sitting there and sitting in the word, because sometimes when you're going through something, like, it's hard to do that. Mm-hmm. I will just sit here and be like, okay, God, I'm lost. Like, tell him, like, I feel lost right now. And it's not necessarily like, because sometimes you don't want to sit there and, like, wait for the answer or whatever, but it's me making the effort to at least, like, let him in on how I'm feeling. You know what I mean? And eventually, like, you will receive some direction or some kind of strength in order to dwell with him, to receive the answers. You know what I mean? Like,
but I feel like that only happens when you sit with a purpose. You
know, like, what I'm saying? Intentionally sit with
you're
God.
Intentionally sitting with God. It just can't be like, God, I don't know what's going on here. I'm kind of like, I'm done. I'm throwing the towel in kind of situation, and I'm gonna let you figure it out. So I feel like what you're saying is correct, but I feel like there has to be some kind of intention.
Well, that's why I was saying, like, sometimes if I'll just go to him like I'm lost, I'll just get the strength to be able to dwell with him intentionally. Because sometimes, you don't just automatically go intentionally every time, because that's hard to do. But sometimes you need him to give you the strength in order to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even still, I've like, haven't necessarily gone to God for direction on a certain thing, but I've gotten it. But I think it's because my heart was open to hearing it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I was going to prayer about finances or something, and God gave me direction on something else. But it's because, like, just because I wasn't praying or talking about that specific thing at the moment, my heart, the Holy Spirit knows what you need and knows the prayers of your heart, like, what your heart, you know what I mean? Like, what you need. So I needed that direction, even though I wasn't necessarily seeking for that specific thing at the time.
Right.
My heart was still open to receiving direction, if that makes sense.
Switching it up just a tiny little bit, let's talk about the direction of a lost soul, a lost Christian.
Okay.
Someone who's been through a traumatic event, or just been through a lot, and wants to give up on God, or just has given up on God. how do you find direction in that? There's not really, you were saying like a specific thing, but not really a specific thing, just in general of losing sight of God.
That's kind of hard because I'm trying to think, like, even in my times I haven't necessarily lost sight. I just kind of was, but I think it kind of depends. Are we talking about somebody who knew God and like has turned away, or like they just never knew God, or like what?
Well, I feel like in order to see, well, it kind of goes both ways, because I was just about to say you would have to know him to seek direction, but you really don't. Mm-hmm. You could feel like you have nowhere else to go, and because you've maybe heard of it or something, God's put it into their heart, whether they were a Christian or not, to move towards his direction. So it could go both ways. So either or, whichever one you want to.
I feel like when you're not necessarily open to God, or like you don't know God and he's calling you, he'll kind of send people, send people in your path. To maybe one of your friends starts going to church and they're like, hey, you want to go to church, or something like that, if it's somebody who lost sight of God, I feel like sometimes, I know this is going to be controversial, but sometimes people need to just feel their feelings and just be like, right now I want to be angry. But it's not like they stay angry forever, but I feel like God allows them that space to be like, okay, you want to be mad at me right now, like I'm giving you, you know what I mean? I'm giving you that space to do that. But I feel like he still does tug on you, especially if you've turned away from him for a reason. He's still in there, you know what I mean? Like, there's been times where I've been like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm done. There's times when you've done the same thing, but it's like, you be like, God, okay, I don't want to talk to you, but he'd be like, okay, I'm right here. And he'd be like, okay, but I'm right here. And you're like, oh, but eventually when you're ready, you know what I mean? The time will, I just be like, the time will come. That's all I can really say, because I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah, speaking from personal experience, like, there was a time where I didn't turn my back, but I avoided going to him because I was living in my flesh. And he sent me other people to try to pull me back, and I just didn't want to, or just, I don't know if I wasn't in the headspace then.
Like the energy,
I knew where I needed to be, but I still fought it. So I wanted to ask a couple questions. So when you are feeling like you've lost
direction. Are you
direction,
asking me, or
no, just in general, yeah. When you are feeling lost and you don't know where to turn, you're like losing sight of the direction that you want to go to. There's specific questions that, when you're seeking God's guidance or direction, that you can ask. Does it align up with God's word? Do you have peace about it? Have you spent time in prayer when you are looking for these guidance and directions? Have you considered fasting? I know that's like a big thing that we'll talk about as well too. What does your gut say? Even though, we don't live by the flesh, everyone still gets that feeling, and that feeling inside of you where it's just like, something doesn't seem right
even
right
if
now.
You try to ignore it, you're like, something.
There's always that feeling inside of you,
And I don't care how many people try to deny it. I feel like it's there. Like, no, for real. Like, people are like, I didn't know.
You can ignore it. Yeah, you can ignore it, but it's there.
Yeah.
Have you talked to a trusted friend? Someone who's spiritually aligned that you can go to when you're feeling down. Has God already told you?
That's
sometimes
a big one.
we ignore.
That's a big one.
Clear as day when he speaks to us. We just completely
and we'll be like,
ignore
okay,
it.
God, I need guidance, and he's like, I already answered.
Yeah.
Like,
and then another question is, are you relying too much on external signs and consciousness?
Coincidences.
Oh yeah. Coincidences. Yeah.
That's a big one as well, because I know, like, people want to make everything a sign. Oh my gosh, that's a black car. I was just saying, like no. oh my gosh,
it's not
that's the
funny
Mercedes that drove by.
you see
Like
it
I knew I
so
wanted a
much.
Mercedes. Like
so much on social media.
But and also, I know I be talking about like they to me a lot, but I just like making people aware of tactics. The enemy does like you know he hears you when you talk and all of these things, and when you talk to these people about things, he'll send you like something to make you feel like, oh my gosh, and it's completely in the opposite direction of what God wants you to do. Because his whole point is to turn you away from God. So he'll send you supernatural direction the wrong way. You know what I mean? And you could be so engulfed in these signs and wonders and all of these things that you're led astray. You know, just like how the word says, like there will be false people in the end who do signs and wonders. People who are just following miracle signs and wonders can be led astray. You know what I mean? So it's the same when you're seeking direction as well. So I think that's why it's important to make sure you know your word and like you're rooted in your word, and how you said, does it line up with the word of God? Because nothing God ever says or directs you to do would be against his word.
Amen.
You know?
Yeah. Amen. Let's see. I found this quote and I just thought it worked. It aligns perfectly. It says, when God changes your direction, it doesn't mean your destination has changed. And I know that because personally I feel like a while ago it's just like, you told me to go here, but why? And all of a sudden,
and it's like, no, you're still gonna end up here.
Yeah,
as you know, like I've experienced this thing.
There's a roadblock here that you won't see that I see, so I need you to go this way.
Or sometimes a decision that we made incorrectly or out of the flesh or whatever would kind of like, you know, like, okay, well, I told you to do this, you didn't want to do it, so now you have to go this way. So that's true. Just because your direction has changed doesn't mean the destination has changed. Sometimes it's like a you know, when you're driving like a detour or like a, sorry, there's a wasp over here, I'm just trying to make sure it stay over there. But you know, when you're driving, sometimes there's a detour. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm gonna get you the same, you know what I mean, like to the same place, but you're just gonna have to take a different route. So
you talked about that when we did our episode on distractions, about having, you know, we also talked about it when we were on Grace too, with our guest Gabriel, when we were talking about like God's telling you to go this way, and instead of going straight ahead, you're like, oh, I see a shortcut here that's gonna make it a little bit faster, and it's like, and then you take that shortcut, and then you end up having 10 roadblocks because you chose to go what you thought was best versus what God told you to do.
So it's just like the Israelites in the wilderness, right? That journey was supposed to take, what, 14 to 20 days or something like that? And they were there for 40 years because of decisions that they made. You know what I'm saying? Like they were still going to the Israelites were still going to the promised land, but they had to take a different journey. Now you have to do it a different way because you didn't want to kind of basically like surrender it to God and trust the direction that he was giving you. And I think sometimes trusting the direction that God gives you is not the easiest thing. Sometimes you might feel like it's not the clearest thing, because especially when you have a lot of noise in your life or you're overwhelmed and things like that, sometimes you can mistake anxiety as like God pushing you to do something. But God's not going to like push you. You know what I mean? He'll lead you, but he's not going to make you feel like, oh my gosh, I got to do this right now. Like God's not in a rush for anything. So even when you come to those times, even if God gave you a direction and then like you became confused and now you have anxiety about it, it's okay to just stand still and ask God, like, okay, I need you to confirm this, because that, you know, now I'm confused, or I'm not sure that that's what you said, or I feel anxious about it, or whatever it is. Because sometimes, I know how you said, like, do you have peace about it? Sometimes God can give you peace about it, but sometimes you can disrupt your own peace about it by worrying about it or stressing about it, or, you know, trying to worry about all the other options that you're missing. You can have peace about that thing, but you don't recognize it because you're overwhelming yourself. You know what I mean? and just like worrying, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I read online when I was, praying and fasting on, this specific topic, I came across something, and it says people often look for signs from God outside of themselves when trying to determine their path, but everything we need to know is in our hearts. So I say that to say, there are discernments. We talked about discernments as well too. God requires the 3 Ds: desire, data, and discernment. So desire. Do you have the desire to actually seek direction, his will? Are you willing to be honest with yourself and have emotional awareness? Are you excited? Are you scared? Like your emotional awareness. Then for data, gathering information. Where are they coming from and what they would mean for your life when you are, seeking his direction and his guidance. And then discernment, making the choice to having the desire to follow his will, choosing the option that increases faith, hope, and love in your life because it's from God.
Right, exactly. And I also want to add to those things, you also need to have patience and discipline and you kind of have to pray diligently. And I like how you were saying are you interested in his desire? Because even though it says it's in our heart, that doesn't mean like it's in whatever we want it to be. It means like, first of all, do you have a heart for God? But when you do have a heart for God, you'll know, you know what I mean? Like your desires and his should align. They should become one. And the reason I said patience and discipline is because sometimes God's not going to answer you right then and there. Sometimes you need to just have patience and need to be able to just stand and be still in not knowing. Sometimes he won't necessarily give you the direction. Sometimes he'll just say, do this. And he won't necessarily tell you, the answer that you're looking for. And discipline, because one, when he gives you that direction, are you going to listen to him? And 2, are you going to, like, if he sends you in a direction you don't want to go, are you going to be like, you know what, you know what I'm saying? Like, discipline and patience and praying diligently, because sometimes he wants to see, he wants you to keep praying. Pray fervently, as they say. Like, even pray without ceasing. If it bothers you, like, keep praying about it. It doesn't mean like, oh, God, give me direction. Oh, I didn't get anything. Okay, I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? Like, keep praying about it. So I feel like those things also could be tacked on to the end of like those 3 Ds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I feel like for me, when it comes to overall seeking God's guidance and direction, it all falls back. I know earlier you were saying something. What were you saying? I just completely lost it. But it goes back to our episode where we talked about faith. In order for you to seek God's guidance and direction, you have to have faith that he's leading you in the right direction, based on what you've asked for as well too. Because God's only going to answer you when you seek him. There are things that God's going to do regardless if you ask him to do it or not to do it, but
because that's just who he is.
But when it comes to asking for guidance and asking for direction, he's only going to give you what you need when you ask him.
Because he's not going to give it to you while you're sitting here relying on all these other things. He wants you to rely on him. So why would he have you rely on something and just give you the answer while you're not really, you know what I'm saying, relying on him? And also, what was I about to say? It just like left. Go ahead if I remember it. Oh my gosh, it was good too.
I ask you a question. Who in the Bible do you know, if you can think of it off the top of your head, seeks God's direction, whether they were a Christian already in the Bible, or one of his followers, or someone that was one of his followers and went to God asking for a direction that they needed? Do you know any stories in the Bible?
Well, there's Abraham, you know, from the very beginning. Well, not the very, very beginning, but there's Abraham. Joseph and Mary. There's Moses, of course. It's literally like
A lot,
I can go through
yeah.
the list. There's Daniel, there's David, Solomon, you know, he asked for wisdom. Paul, Peter, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Oh,
like,
but Paul.
But I'm saying afterwards he got that direction.
He did. And you know, it's crazy.
And he wasn't looking for it.
When we talk about pride, I'm going to share a story about Paul, who was later renamed.
No, it was Saul who was later renamed Paul.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Why was I thinking? No, it was the other way around. No, you're right.
Yeah.
Right. But no, yeah, I have a story that I want to talk about when we talk about pride.
Okay. And I remember what I was gonna say. Okay. And it's something that I had to learn recently because, you know, I used to be very hard on myself. I'm working on it. I feel like God knows your intention. Well, not I feel like. I know he knows your intention so much that if he gives you direction and you genuinely miss it, you know what I mean? If you genuinely miss it and make the wrong decision, even though it might take you a different way, it's still going to work out for your good. Like, it's not like he's not going to redirect you.
No, absolutely. I mean? But you can only miss that direction so many times, though.
But that's why I'm saying genuinely. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing it. It's like you're genuinely think like, okay, I feel like God's leading me this way. You know what I'm saying? And I think I've had to trust and have faith in that my God is bigger than like my inconsistencies or imperfections. Like, and the thing is he already knows when you're going to make the right decision and when you're going to make the wrong one. So his plan has already like accounted for my mistakes or accounted for my misdirects. So
yeah, because he knows and sees what's already in your mind before it's already.
But he's also outside of time, so he knows what happened already. But I just wanted to say that just in case, because I used to be very anxious about like I'm literally not doing anything because I don't want to make the wrong decision. You know what I mean? I don't want to go the wrong direction. So much so that it was like making me like panic a little bit. So he kind of had to, you know, just move, like trust me, like move, and trust also the discernment that I've given you to like if you move and that's the wrong way, that he'll say something. You know what I mean? To trust that he will.
I want to ask you all, and even including you, Marissa, has there ever been a time where God has given you a direction and you've missed it? What did you do? Do you know that you missed it? Do you know that it was the direction that he wanted you to go in? Maybe you questioned it on if whether or not it was the right direction, or maybe you just didn't know that was him speaking to you, and that's how you missed it. So my question to you is, have you ever experienced a time where God spoke to you and I don't want to say you ignored it, but nor do I want to say you questioned it, but you just didn't hear it.
I'm trying to think of which thing I feel like saying here. I know there have been times where God has told me something and I maybe handled it in the wrong way. It didn't change what he said. It didn't change anything like that. But because of my ignorance, I handled it the wrong way. So like it was kind of like, you know how you said like the destination doesn't change but the direction, that kind of thing. But also so as you know, like I dealt with a lot. Like, was that last year? It was last year. Dang, that felt like a long time ago. There were these people that I kind of like involved myself with. We would read the word, all of that stuff. But I remember the first time I saw them, my spirit was like, no. You know what I mean? But I personally overrode my discernment because I thought that I was being judgy because I didn't necessarily have a reason to feel that way. So I kind of like ignored my discernment in that point, which is ignoring, you know, God saying like no. Because I was thinking that I was being judgmental for just saying no right off bat, you know, and not having a real reason to, which now I'd be like, I don't know why, but I got to go. But by me ignoring my discernment, it took me through a lot. I dealt with a lot of like stuff that I don't know how to even explain it, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I feel like discernment and direction, as far as like, I feel like discernment is direction as well, kind of. So what about you?
Yeah, I just mean, when I talked about where he sent you to me, it was clear as day. He was trying to.
But you were like, no.
Like, no. I don't have time for this right now. So yeah, before I was renewed, reborn, however you want to say it, there were plenty of times where God would show me or tell me or send someone to stop me from making a decision or going a certain way, and I just completely ignored it because I thought I knew better, or he wasn't giving enough information. So I'm like, well, I have all the details, so unless you tell me A, B, C, D, and F, I'm just gonna go the way that I want to know.
Right, it don't work like that.
Because I know what's best for me, not that he already knew what was best for me.
Right.
Which caused me a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. But at that time, I was young, so to me it was just like, oh, it's just another obstacle. It's just what you deal with when you're this age.
Right.
I always had a reason in my mind for why I went through what I went through, and none of those reasons had to deal with God.
Right. And the word says, like, my people perish for a lack of knowledge, and it's really just our ignorance. It wasn't like we genuinely were like, God, it was literally we thought we were doing right, or we thought we knew, or we thought whatever. And that's okay. When you know better, you do better, but we didn't know it at that point. So there's a lot of times I look back on like decisions I've made and been like, Marissa, what were you doing? Like, why did you think that was like, okay, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, no. I really thank God for this new life that I live, because when I think about the past, and I know we've experienced a lot of things together, when I think about it, it's laughable now, in the sense of like, wow, like, I'm so happy that I'm not there anymore. But it's not laughable in the sense of like, why did it take me so long to get here?
But I think it also helps us to have grace for other people when they're kind of like in that moment of trying to, because we were there, and it's like, okay, I'm on the other side now, so I can see it differently, but I understand you're in it, so you're not seeing it like that.
I think it's grace to a certain extent, and correct me if you feel differently. A lot of times, like, as adults, you see a child and you tell a child no because you see the danger before the child sees it, but they need to experience it themselves before they understand why you told them no. I feel like in certain situations, even from an adult to an adult relationship, you try to tell someone or to guide someone or lead them to where they don't make the mistakes, and they willingly and intentionally choose the opposite. So it is something that I'm working on myself. It's hard for me to give grace in that aspect, but I know it's not for me to judge, and it's not for me to decide whether or not, or to be mad in the sense of, I'm not going to help you anymore because you don't want to listen. And I feel like that's what I've done a lot in the past, where it's just like, well, I told you don't do it. You asked my advice, I told you don't do it, and you still went and did it. Like, what was the point of you asking me for? That's the kind of attitude that I had.
Right. I mean, I used to be very much like Bible thumper, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I still be low key, but so I used to be very much like, no, you cannot do it this way, rather than letting people make their own decisions. But I don't feel like there's anything wrong with you feeling like, I'm trying to help you and you're not listening to me, so I'm not going to help you anymore. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but by grace I meant like recognizing that some people do need to go through it, or recognizing that, okay, I was in that space and like I'm here now, so you can get here, but maybe you need to take your own thing. But what I have also learned is that I'm not going to deplete myself trying to force feed anybody. I can give you, I can help you, whatever, but at some point, it's draining me. If I keep pouring out and it's just like going on the ground, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's not helpful for me. And you know, I used to help people to my own, like I would make myself sick helping people, but I just can't do that anymore because that's not beneficial to anyone. And when that happens, then I'm more reluctant to help other people because of this situation. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the way that you're thinking about it. It's kind of like the happy medium. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it still requires grace.
Yeah.
And everyone deserves grace.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever a situation where someone doesn't deserve
It's like,
grace.
it's not my job to judge you. I'm not going to think any less of you. I just recognize that where you're at right now, you need to go through whatever it is that you're going through, you need to finish going through, you know?
Because also it's like, there was a time where when someone would do something or I would say something on social media, the first thing I would do is like, Marissa, did you see what so-and-so just did? Like, oh my gosh, like X, Y, Z, W, you know? Now I see something on social media and the first thing I want to do is if it's in me, I pray over that person. Or I'm just like, you know what, I allow them that grace for the mistake that was made or the miscommunication, misunderstanding, or whatever it is, instead of going into the situation just wanting to talk about someone, you know?
Or like even people who are in the world and don't necessarily reverence God, I kind of don't allow that to make me stressed or angry anymore. I'm just kind of like, you know, you see people doing things or acting a way that's not godly, but they don't serve God anyway. So it's kind of like, how am I going to be upset and hold you to a God standard that you didn't, you know what I'm saying? That you didn't say you would subscribe to, and that's your choice. I can't feel like I can take away someone's free will when God gave it to them.
Right.
So that's kind of how I feel about it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no. I'm glad we're talking about this because I think a lot of people, this conversation wasn't about grace, but it all ties in together when we speak about grace, because when someone's seeking guidance and seeking direction, they're gonna go and hit a few walls before they find that divine direction
And some people
that they're
need
looking
to.
for. And like you were saying throughout this entire video, is some people do need to experience those obstacles or spiritual attacks or, you know, walls that they run into in order to find his divine direction. Because in that divine direction, once you receive it, like I was asking, you'll be at peace. You'll find peace. You'll know what God is telling you and understand his reasons for you moving in the direction that he allowed you to move in to get to where you are now. So I never find it, and you know, let me know what you think. I never find it in me to regret the decisions and the mistakes that we've made in our past. I find them as motivation and as a testimony for others to avoid others and you know, my child, you know, future kids, to be able to teach them, because I think a lot of the things I experienced too, I didn't have the proper guidance to not experience them, because my family is culturally different, so they weren't raised in this American you know, society that I was raised in. So a lot of things they didn't know in that aspect to be able to teach me, so I don't blame them at all for that. And then a lot of it had to do with me being very adventurous and wanting to experience life at a faster pace than I probably should have.
And growing up in LA is a little bit,
and that has to do with a lot of it too. I didn't grow up here, but I went to high school out here, and it was different for me because I come from a military background, so I've always, discipline was actually a big thing. And being around other military kids, like, you know, especially when your dad or mom, whoever is in service, is in a higher rank. There's a higher standard that you're held to. And when I moved to LA, I didn't have those same standards. So there were a lot of things that I thought I could get away with because
yeah,
I didn't have the same rules. So and the punishment wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So LA did that to me.
but I think as far as regretting, I think now, no. I think back then I was like, oh, because it was frustrating. We went through a lot of frustrating things. Probably wasted a lot of time. Yes, God does like restore that time, but it doesn't mean that we didn't waste time in those situations, because I do feel like when I look back, God did, I don't want to say try to pull us out, but he was pretty clear on those situations, but we didn't necessarily recognize that it was the voice of God. I think we just kind of were, in some situations we were numb, in some situations we were kind of like, okay, well, what else are we supposed to do? Like, this is what people do, so how else, So to say I regret it, no, because I think it has helped us, and let me not say us, I'm gonna say me because I don't want to speak for you, to grow. But do I think that I could have grown without that situation? Yes. But I can now speak to or help people who have been in that situation.
You're more I'm not saying you're more relatable, but you're relatable.
Understand.
Yeah, you're relatable in that aspect.
Yeah.
For a long time, therapy wasn't like my thing. So I felt like I couldn't talk to someone who's never experienced the same thing that I've experienced. So in the sense of you saying that the way you went through what you went through, you're now able to relate to those who may be going through the same thing or some version of what you're saying. That's the same way I felt about therapy. They don't have to go exactly through the same obstacles that you went through in order for a therapist to understand.
Trauma is trauma.
Trauma is trauma.
Yeah.
So one trauma is not more than the next trauma, because how I take a certain trauma, you might be like, oh, Michelle, that's not that big of a deal.
Exactly.
But it is to me. So it shouldn't be diminished. In the same way when you're seeking God, like, it might be easier for you because you decided to be the one that listens and follows the direction. But I decided to be hard-headed and go around it. But we still end up in the same in the same spot, and the purpose is to go in the direction to see God.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really the takeaway from it. Like, regardless of how you got there, the goal for direction is to see God. Regardless of if you had to hit rock bottom first, if you had to go through this first, if you had to go through that, or if you just were always there, the key of direction is to follow God. Whether it's he has a plan for us. And back to faith, like, you have to have faith that he does actually have that plan and seek him out for it. He's not just going to lay it out for you. And even when he does tell you the plan, he's still not going to give you the whole layout. Like, you have to seek him in order to know which way to go, and trust that, because when you're following his direction, that means that even when hardships come in that area, his grace is over that, his hand, because he told you to do that. So it's not like he told you to do it and then you do it and then things fall apart and he's like, oh, well, dang. No, like, he sent you there. He knew what you were going to encounter while you were there. He knew you were graced for it, or you were strong enough to get through it, and he's going to help you through it. You know how, that saying, like, anything that you go outside of God's will to get, you have to stay out of his will to keep. It's the same thing. If you're within his will and within his direction, he's going to cover you in it, and he's going to help you through it.
No, absolutely. So I think the overall takeaway that we want to give you all is, I know Marissa said this plenty of times, it's not always easy. It's not always easy, but it's that first step that you take of asking him for direction.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah. So it's that first step that you take it's always the hardest step. But once you take that step, you know, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You will, I promise.
Yeah.
You will be okay. So I think this was an amazing
Episode.
I hope you guys took a lot from it. And in the comment section, yeah, go ahead and tell us about a time that you were seeking God's direction and what happened. What did you get from it? Did God give you the guidance that you were looking for? Did you miss the sign but end up still finding your way back? Let us know and we'll be happy to read them. So until next time,
Bye.
see you later.
I do it for God. You know he the truth. I do it for God.